In the realm of human behavior and neurobiology, consistency isn't just a nice-to-have trait, it's the cornerstone of lasting change. Our brain craves patterns, it thrives on repetition, and it's through forceful, deliberate action that we sculpt neural circuits that define who we become. Today, I want to dive deep into how you can harness the power of your brain's plasticity to force yourself into consistency, because when you do, you don't just build habits, you build an unshakable foundation for success. Let's explore the science and mindset behind becoming relentless in your pursuit. Consistency rewires your brain for long-term change because of the fundamental way our nervous system adapts and learns. The brain is not a static organ. It is highly plastic, meaning it has the capacity to change its structure and function in response to experience and repeated behavior. This phenomenon, known as neuroplasticity, underpins the process by which consistent actions translate into lasting transformation. When you engage in a behavior repeatedly, your brain begins to strengthen the neural pathways associated with that behavior. Neurons that fire together wire together. This classic principle from neuroscience means that the more often a specific circuit in the brain is activated, the more robust and efficient it becomes. Over time, what once required conscious effort can become automatic, encoded into the deeper layers of your brain. This is how habits form and why consistency is so vital. It is the mechanism by which learning becomes ingrained. The regions of the brain involved in habit formation, such as the basal ganglia, are particularly influenced by repetitive actions. The basal ganglia act as a sort of autopilot system, enabling behaviors to be executed with minimal conscious input once they have been sufficiently practiced. This frees up cognitive resources for other tasks and allows for greater efficiency in daily life. Importantly, this means that initial discipline and conscious effort give way to ease and fluidity as consistency shapes the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive functions like planning, decision-making, and self-control, plays a crucial role early on when you are consciously trying to establish a new behavior. However, this region is metabolically costly and prone to fatigue. Without consistent practice, the prefrontal cortex cannot maintain effort indefinitely. But as behaviors become ingrained through repetition, the reliance on this area decreases, shifting control to more primitive, efficient brain systems. This shift highlights why sporadic effort or inconsistent attempts at change often fail. The brain requires regular, repeated input to create durable change. Skipping days, giving up after setbacks, or lacking a routine means the neural connections never fully strengthen and old patterns remain dominant. Consistency provides the reliable stimuli that the brain uses to build new neural architecture. Another important aspect is that the brain's reward system is deeply intertwined with consistency. Dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reward, plays a key role in reinforcing repeated behavior. When an action leads to a positive outcome, or even the anticipation of one, dopamine release strengthens the connections between neurons involved in that action. Over time, consistent behavior creates a feedback loop where the brain anticipates reward, making it more likely you will repeat the behavior. Dopamine does not just respond to external rewards. The mere act of successfully performing a behavior, particularly when it's challenging or requires effort, can also trigger dopamine release. This internal reinforcement mechanism helps explain why consistent practice, even without immediate external reward, can gradually become self-sustaining. Consistency impacts brain regions involved in emotional regulation, such as the amygdala and hippocampus. Repeated exposure to certain stimuli or behaviors can modulate how these regions respond to stress or discomfort. For example, consistently practicing mindfulness or controlled breathing can decrease amygdala reactivity, leading to improved emotional resilience. This means consistent behavior not only builds new skills but also reshapes emotional responses, making it easier to stay on course over time. The interplay between consistency and neuroplasticity also involves structural changes. Studies using brain imaging have shown that regions involved in practice skills can increase in volume or connectivity. Musicians, athletes, and meditators, for example, exhibit measurable brain differences compared to non-practitioners, attributable to long-term, consistent practice. This physical evidence reinforces the idea that consistency literally sculpts the brain, turning fleeting efforts into permanent neural architecture. Finally, it's important to recognize that rewiring the brain through consistency requires patience and realistic expectations. Neural changes do not happen overnight, they are gradual and cumulative. Initial progress might feel slow or frustrating, but persistence is what enables the brain to adapt deeply. Each repetition is a building block. Each day of consistent effort lays down new pathways. And over weeks and months, these pathways become the dominant routes your brain uses to process and act. This is the essence of how consistency rewires the brain for long-term change. Small, repeated actions compound into powerful habits because of the way the brain processes and reinforces behaviors over time. The principle behind this is that change does not typically happen through massive, sudden transformations, but through incremental steps that accumulate and build momentum. These small, consistent efforts might seem insignificant on their own, but together they create a profound and lasting impact. At the core of this process is the concept of habit formation. Habits are behaviors that have been repeated enough times to become automatic, requiring little conscious thought or effort to execute. The brain is wired to seek efficiency, so once a behavior becomes habitual, it frees up mental resources for other tasks. This automaticity is what makes habits so powerful. They become the default mode of action, occurring without the need for active decision-making. When you focus on small actions repeated consistently, you are essentially feeding your brain a steady stream of practice. Each repetition serves as a signal to the brain that this behavior is important and worth reinforcing. This process is strengthened by what is known as the compound effect, where the results of these small actions multiply over time. Just as compound interest grows exponentially in finance, consistent habits grow in influence and effect as they are layered day after day. The advantage of starting small is twofold. First, smaller actions are easier to initiate and sustain because they don't overwhelm your mental or physical capacity. This reduces the likelihood of resistance or burnout. For example, committing to just 5 minutes of exercise a day is far less daunting than committing to an hour, making it easier to maintain consistency. Second, small wins create positive feedback loops. Each time you complete a small action, your brain rewards you with a sense of accomplishment, releasing dopamine, which increases motivation and encourages you to continue. This incremental approach aligns with the brain's natural learning curve. Learning anything new involves stages: initial acquisition, practice, consolidation, and mastery. By breaking down complex goals into manageable chunks and focusing on daily repetition, you allow your brain to progress steadily through these stages. The repetitive nature of small actions helps encode the behavior into memory and strengthens the neural pathways associated with it. Small, repeated actions reduce the risk of failure that can accompany attempts at drastic change. When goals are set too high or changes are attempted too abruptly, it's easy to become discouraged if immediate progress isn't evident. This discouragement often leads to giving up. In contrast, small actions provide frequent opportunities for success, building confidence and resilience. Over time, this positive momentum becomes self-sustaining, pushing you further toward your goals. Another important factor is that small habits often trigger larger behavioral cascades. For instance, starting your day with a brief period of meditation can lead to improved focus, which in turn enhances productivity and decision-making throughout the day. Likewise, drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning might lead to healthier eating choices later. These ripple effects demonstrate how tiny actions can influence broader patterns of behavior, multiplying their impact beyond the initial step. Consistency in small actions also helps overcome the brain's natural tendency to seek immediate gratification. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for self-control and long-term planning, can be easily overridden by impulses for short-term rewards. However, by establishing reliable routines anchored in small actions, you create a framework that supports delayed gratification and goal-oriented behavior. Over time, these routines become deeply ingrained, reducing the cognitive load of decision-making and making it easier to resist distractions. The environment plays a critical role in supporting the compound effect of small actions. Designing your surroundings to cue desired behaviors like placing running shoes by the door or keeping a journal on your nightstand makes it easier to follow through consistently. These environmental triggers help initiate the small actions automatically, reinforcing the habit loop of cue, routine, and reward. Importantly, the compound effect works because it leverages the brain's adaptive capacity. Each small action not only strengthens neural pathways related to the specific behavior, but also enhances overall brain function related to self-discipline, motivation, and executive control. This cumulative neural strengthening supports greater capacity for change and growth. By understanding and applying the principle that small, repeated actions compound into powerful habits, you tap into a scientifically backed strategy for sustainable personal development. This approach transforms daunting goals into achievable steps and uses the brain's natural learning mechanisms to create lasting, positive change. Willpower is a limited resource. Structure and routine sustain consistency because relying solely on moment-to-moment motivation or sheer self-control is often unsustainable. The human brain operates with finite energy, and exerting continuous willpower depletes this energy quickly, leading to what psychologists call ego depletion. When willpower is drained, decision-making suffers, temptations become harder to resist, and the likelihood of abandoning goals increases. This natural limitation means that if you depend only on your willpower to stay consistent, you are setting yourself up for struggle. The brain's executive functions, managed primarily by the prefrontal cortex, are responsible for self-control, planning, and managing impulses. These functions are incredibly important but also metabolically expensive. Each time you resist a temptation or push yourself to act against inertia, your prefrontal cortex uses glucose and other resources which can become depleted over time, especially when facing multiple decisions or stressors throughout the day. This biological reality explains why willpower can feel strong in the morning but wane by evening, leading to lapses in consistency. This is where structure and routine become critical. Unlike willpower, which is an effortful process, routines operate more automatically once established. By embedding behaviors into a structured schedule, you reduce the cognitive load associated with decision-making. When a behavior becomes part of a routine, the brain shifts control from the prefrontal cortex to more automatic systems such as the basal ganglia, which execute behaviors with less conscious effort. This transition from deliberate action to habit formation frees up mental energy and allows consistency to persist without constant conscious battle. Creating structure means designing your environment and daily schedule so that the desired actions are cued reliably and easily accessible. For example, scheduling a specific time for exercise or meditation each day leverages temporal cues that prime your brain to expect and prepare for the activity. These cues serve as triggers that bypass the need for daily motivational surges, making it easier to follow through consistently. Without this scaffolding, each decision to act requires a fresh burst of willpower, increasing the chance of failure. Routines also capitalize on the brain's preference for predictability and efficiency. The brain is naturally inclined to reduce uncertainty and conserve energy by favoring habits and repeated behaviors. When you establish a routine, you create a predictable framework that the brain can rely on, minimizing the friction associated with change. This predictability reduces anxiety and resistance, smoothing the path for sustained action. Structure helps manage external and internal distractions. Life is filled with unexpected demands, emotional fluctuations, and competing priorities. When you have a well-defined routine, these disruptions are less likely to derail your progress because the behavior is anchored in a fixed slot in your day. The routine becomes a non-negotiable part of your schedule, not subject to whims or fluctuating motivation. Importantly, routines can be designed to start small and gradually build complexity, which aligns well with how the brain learns and adapts. Starting with simple, easy-to-follow structures prevents overwhelm and makes adherence more likely. As these routines solidify, you can layer additional behaviors or increase intensity, leveraging the momentum gained from consistent foundation building. This incremental approach respects the limits of willpower while maximizing the power of habitual action. Another key advantage of structure and routine is their role in shaping identity and self-perception. Consistent engagement in behaviors anchored by routines reinforces the narrative you tell yourself about who you are. For example, if your routine includes daily reading or exercise, you begin to see yourself as a reader or an active person. This identity reinforcement creates a positive feedback loop, motivating further consistency, not just out of obligation, but because it aligns with your sense of self. To implement effective structure, it's crucial to identify and eliminate unnecessary choices and distractions. Decision fatigue is a real phenomenon, and every unnecessary choice taxes your willpower. Simplifying your day by pre-deciding actions such as what to wear, what to eat, or when to work out conserves mental energy for important decisions. This simplification supports your ability to stick with consistent behaviors over time. Finally, while willpower can spark initial change, it is the scaffolding of structure and routine that sustains progress. By designing your environment and habits to minimize reliance on fluctuating motivation, you create a system that supports consistency even when willpower wanes. This approach is not about eliminating effort, but about channeling effort efficiently, allowing you to maintain momentum and build lasting change. Triggering cues anchor consistent behavior in your environment because they serve as the initial spark that activates a habit loop within the brain. Habits are typically formed through a cycle of cue, routine, and reward, where the cue signals the brain to initiate a specific behavior. The routine is the behavior itself, and the reward reinforces the behavior by satisfying a need or desire. Without a reliable cue, it becomes difficult to initiate and maintain consistent actions, as behaviors often rely on external or internal triggers to prompt execution. Cues can take many forms: visual, auditory, temporal, emotional, or situational. For example, a visual cue might be seeing your running shoes placed by the door. An auditory cue might be a specific alarm or sound. Temporal cues rely on the time of day. Emotional cues tie to feelings like stress or excitement. And situational cues come from the context you are in, like entering the gym. The effectiveness of a cue lies in its ability to consistently signal the same behavior in a response, helping the brain develop an automatic association between the trigger and the action. The brain's basal ganglia, which are heavily involved in habit formation, become trained to recognize these cues and respond with the programmed behavior. This reduces the need for conscious decision-making each time you perform the behavior. Instead of relying on fluctuating motivation or willpower, the cue acts as a reliable prompt, initiating the routine almost automatically. This is why establishing strong cues in your environment is essential to sustaining consistency. One powerful way to leverage cues is by designing your environment intentionally. By arranging your surroundings to include clear, unavoidable signals for desired behaviors, you make it easier for your brain to initiate those behaviors without hesitation. For example, if your goal is to drink more water, placing a water bottle on your desk where you can see it regularly acts as a visual cue that prompts hydration throughout the day. If you want to read more, keeping a book on your pillow reminds you to read before bed. These environmental tweaks reduce friction and mental effort required to remember and start the action. Temporal cues are especially effective because the brain is sensitive to routines that happen at the same time each day. When you commit to performing a behavior at a specific time, like exercising every morning at 7:m, your brain begins to anticipate the behavior as part of your daily rhythm. Over time, the circadian rhythms and internal clocks sync with these temporal cues, making it more natural and automatic to engage in the activity. This predictability further entrenches the habit and makes lapses less likely. Emotional or internal cues are another critical element. Certain feelings can trigger behaviors, both positive and negative. For instance, stress might trigger overeating or smoking, while feelings of excitement might prompt someone to engage in a creative hobby. To anchor consistent positive behavior, it's important to become aware of your emotional triggers and consciously link them to productive routines. This can involve mindfulness practices or reflective journaling that helps identify patterns and redirect emotional cues toward constructive habits. The power of cues also lies in their ability to break through moments of low motivation. Motivation can fluctuate daily or even hourly, but a strong cue bypasses the need to feel like it. When a cue is firmly associated with a routine, it prompts action regardless of your current mood or energy level. This is crucial for maintaining consistency over the long term because relying on motivation alone is often unreliable and unsustainable. Additionally, cues can create a chain reaction of behaviors. For example, placing your workout clothes beside your bed might trigger you to change into them, which then cues you to go for a run, and completing the run rewards you with a sense of accomplishment. This sequence demonstrates how one cue can lead to multiple productive actions, amplifying the impact of environmental triggers. It's also important to note that weakening or removing cues associated with unwanted behaviors can help disrupt bad habits. If you're trying to reduce screen time, for instance, putting your phone in another room or turning off notifications reduces the cues that prompt habitual checking. By controlling cues both to encourage good habits and discourage bad ones, you gain greater mastery over your behavior patterns. In summary, triggering cues work by signaling your brain to begin a routine, making behavior initiation smoother and more automatic. Designing your environment and daily schedule to include consistent, clear cues enables you to anchor behaviors effectively, reducing reliance on willpower and motivation. This mechanism helps build habits that stick and ensures that consistent behavior becomes a natural part of your life. Accountability increases commitment and follow-through because it introduces an external or internal system of responsibility that motivates you to stick with your goals and actions. When you know that someone else is aware of your intentions, progress, or setbacks, it creates a sense of obligation to act consistently. This sense of being answerable triggers social and psychological mechanisms that strengthen your drive to maintain behaviors over time. From a psychological perspective, accountability taps into the human need for social approval and belonging. We are inherently social creatures who care about how others perceive us. When you share your goals or commitments with others, whether a friend, mentor, coach, or even a group, you activate the desire to meet their expectations and avoid the discomfort of disappointing or being judged negatively. This social pressure acts as a powerful motivator that can sustain effort when internal motivation fluctuates. Accountability also brings clarity and structure to your goals. When you articulate what you intend to do and share it with someone, you are more likely to define specific, measurable actions. This clarity reduces ambiguity and vagueness, which are common barriers to consistency. The act of reporting progress or setbacks requires you to track your actions and outcomes more diligently, fostering greater self-awareness and focus. This self-monitoring itself can improve follow-through by highlighting where adjustments are needed and reinforcing positive behavior. Accountability encourages commitment through regular check-ins or feedback loops. Having scheduled times to report progress, whether daily, weekly, or monthly, creates deadlines that drive action. These checkpoints serve as moments to reflect on your journey, celebrate successes, and identify obstacles. The anticipation of sharing your progress heightens your motivation to prepare and maintain consistency, reducing procrastination and avoidance. In addition to external accountability, cultivating internal accountability, holding yourself responsible, is equally important. Developing personal standards and values that align with your goals creates a self-regulatory system that supports long-term commitment. Internal accountability means you take ownership of your actions and consequences without needing external pressure. Techniques like journaling, setting personal milestones, and practicing honest self-reflection strengthen this inner sense of responsibility. Accountability partnerships or groups amplify motivation by creating a shared sense of purpose and support. When you join forces with others pursuing similar goals, you benefit from collective encouragement, advice, and constructive criticism. This social support reduces feelings of isolation and boosts resilience against setbacks. It also introduces healthy competition, which can elevate performance and consistency. Research has shown that individuals who engage in accountability relationships are significantly more likely to achieve their goals compared to those who work alone. This is partly because accountability increases your emotional investment in the outcome. When someone else is involved, you care more deeply about succeeding, not just for yourself, but also to honor the relationship or commitment you've made. This shared accountability makes abandoning goals less likely. Accountability also helps manage common challenges like distractions, competing priorities, and wavering motivation. Knowing that you will have to explain lapses or failures encourages you to anticipate obstacles and plan strategies proactively. This forward-thinking mindset enhances problem-solving and reduces the risk of derailment. Additionally, the presence of accountability can provide gentle nudges or reminders that keep your efforts on track, functioning as an external support system that complements your internal drive. The act of verbalizing your goals and progress to another person solidifies your intentions in your mind. Speaking about your commitments reinforces neural pathways associated with goal-directed behavior, increasing the likelihood of consistent action. This cognitive reinforcement supports habit formation and strengthens your mental resolve. It is important to choose accountability partners who are trustworthy, supportive, and constructive. Negative or unsupportive feedback can undermine motivation and confidence, whereas positive reinforcement and empathetic understanding foster perseverance. Ideally, accountability relationships balance encouragement with honest, respectful challenge to push you toward growth. Finally, accountability is not about punishment or shame, but about fostering a growth-oriented mindset. When framed positively, accountability becomes a tool for learning and development, helping you celebrate progress and learn from setbacks. It creates a cycle of action, reflection, and adjustment that propels you forward, increasing the likelihood that consistency becomes an ingrained part of your life. Self-compassion helps sustain consistency by providing the emotional resilience needed to navigate setbacks and failures without losing momentum. When you engage in new habits or pursue challenging goals, encountering obstacles, mistakes, or periods of low performance is inevitable. Without self-compassion, these experiences can trigger harsh self-criticism, shame, and discouragement, which undermine motivation and increase the likelihood of giving up. In contrast, self-compassion allows you to treat yourself with kindness and understanding, maintaining a positive internal dialogue that supports continued effort. At its core, self-compassion involves recognizing that imperfection and struggle are part of the shared human experience. Everyone encounters difficulties and makes mistakes on the path to growth. This recognition reduces feelings of isolation and helps normalize setbacks, framing them not as personal failures but as natural occurrences. By adopting this perspective, you create a mental environment where it's safer to take risks, learn from errors, and keep moving forward despite challenges. When you practice self-compassion, you shift from a punitive mindset to a nurturing one. Instead of berating yourself for missing a workout, slipping into old habits, or falling short of expectations, you respond with encouragement and patience. This supportive inner voice reassures you that setbacks do not define your worth or determine the ultimate outcome of your efforts. This emotional safety net reduces stress and anxiety, which can otherwise drain your willpower and hinder consistent action. Research in psychology supports the powerful role of self-compassion in enhancing motivation and perseverance. Studies have shown that people who cultivate self-compassion are more likely to maintain healthy behaviors, recover more quickly from lapses, and demonstrate greater psychological well-being. This is because self-compassion mitigates the negative effects of failure, allowing individuals to bounce back rather than spiral downward. It creates a feedback loop where kindness fuels resilience, which in turn promotes a sustained engagement with goals. Self-compassion also promotes realistic goal setting and reduces the pressure to be perfect. Perfectionism often sabotages consistency by creating unrealistic standards that are impossible to meet all the time. When perfection is the benchmark, any deviation can feel like a catastrophic failure, leading to frustration and eventual abandonment of efforts. Self-compassion helps you set achievable goals, acknowledge incremental progress, and celebrate small wins, fostering a sense of accomplishment that motivates ongoing commitment. Another important aspect of self-compassion is mindfulness, being aware of your thoughts and feelings without judgment. Mindfulness enables you to observe setbacks or negative self-talk with curiosity rather than resistance. This non-reactive awareness prevents you from getting caught in cycles of rumination or self-blame, which can erode confidence and energy. Instead, mindfulness paired with self-compassion cultivates a balanced mindset that embraces both the difficulties and the potential for growth. In practical terms, integrating self-compassion into your journey toward consistency might involve simple but powerful practices. For example, when you miss a day of your habit, instead of harshly criticizing yourself, you can acknowledge the disappointment and remind yourself that this moment does not erase your overall progress. Affirmations like "it's okay to stumble, what matters is that I keep going" reinforce a compassionate outlook. Journaling about your experiences with kindness rather than judgment also strengthens this mindset over time. Self-compassion also influences how you respond to external feedback or criticism. When you have a foundation of kindness toward yourself, negative feedback is less likely to trigger defensiveness or despair. Instead, you can evaluate criticism objectively, extracting useful insights without damaging your self-esteem. This balanced response enhances your ability to adjust strategies and maintain consistent effort toward improvement. Importantly, self-compassion fosters intrinsic motivation.